because most of our lives are so far from balance that we can't even fathom it. And this is what happens. We are torn from pillar to post. We have so many things, so many aspects of us that we don't know which way to go. And I love this picture here. Every day we're having to be so much, to do so much, to play so many roles. And constantly we're feeling like we're walking on a tightrope. Some people fall off that tightrope and some people stay on the tightrope. But what happens is when we're walking on the tightrope, life feels chaotic. It feels out of control, overwhelming, exhausting, and like an existence. We're not living life. And this imbalance that we're feeling is the underlying cause of all of our weight and food issues. It doesn't matter what your issue is, whether it's yo-yo dieting, emotional eating, binge eating, nighttime eating, food addiction, obesity. The whole underlying reason is imbalance. And I'm going to unpack that throughout this webinar tonight. The greater the imbalance, the worse the eating and weight issues get. So part of what causes the imbalance is the combination between our past issues and our present. And that depends on how big our imbalance is or how far out of balance we are. So let's look at some of our past and how this can create imbalance in the present. So our past really is the foundation of our life. It is where we create our beliefs and our thought patterns. And a lot of people who have weight and food issues don't think they're good enough. So that's a belief about themselves. And as a result, that's what stops them. That's the imbalance that stops them from achieving what they want to with their food and weight. The thought pattern of everything has to be perfect, which creates an all or nothing cycle and keeps us on that roller coaster of dieting, of trying to constantly seek that instant gratification, that quick fix. Then we have our self-esteem, our self-identity, confidence and efficacy. And again, if we don't think worthy of change, if we don't think we're worthy of being healthy, then we're not going to be. If we see ourselves as the fat person, the sick person, then again, we're not going to achieve what we want. We have so many fears that are created from our past. Fear of success and fear of failure are two of the main ones that are associated with food and weight. Well, when you've got fear of success and fear of failure, where are you stuck? You're stuck with doing nothing. You're stuck in procrastination. You're stuck in not moving. Then it affects your mood, depression, anxiety, mental health issues. You develop your coping ability, your ability for resilience, and your coping strategies in your past, and how you communicate, not with just other people, but with yourself. You learn this from your parents, from other people. But what tends to happen is we are nice to people outside, but we're not very nice to ourselves. And this causes an imbalance. This keeps us in the cycle. And the aspects of our life where this is all created is from our family. Our foundations are from our family, our parents, our siblings, our grandparents. In our childhood. And that's why I asked you the question before about which aspect or period of your life has contributed the most to your food and weight issues. and most of you stated childhood. Then we've got our adolescence, our early adulthood, and adulthood. And each of these things contribute to our present. And what happens is that if we don't fully heal and resolve the issues in our past, that they become like cracks in our foundation of who we are. And if the cracks get big enough, they start to erode who we are, what we want for ourselves. No matter how much we strive, then you can't achieve anything, because this foundation is eroded, it's cracked. So the idea is that we need to fix and repair the foundation from our past if we are to get through this, if we are to achieve what we want to achieve with our health and weight. Then, of course, we have the present. And this is all of the aspects of our lives now. Work, finances, family, relationships, friends, social life, fun, relaxation, spirituality, personal growth. Now, if this is imbalanced, and majority of the time we find that this is imbalanced, we're spending so much time at work, worrying about finances, doing so much or giving so much to the family, that we have little time for ourselves. And it's not selfish to actually put yourself on the priority list. And people who have food and weight issues, what we find is that they have an others focus. So they give to others and other aspects, and they forget about themselves. And if we don't give to ourselves, what we find is the current aspects about who we are, our health, begins to turn into illness. Our stress levels start to increase. The hours and quality of our sleep decrease. Even though we want to eat healthily, because of the imbalance, we don't necessarily have nutrition, we have addiction. So we go for the junk foods to try and balance us out. And then our activity levels. Many of you said that you find it difficult to be active because of your physical ailments, injuries, things like that. So what this generally is out of balance. And this all creates a pattern of imbalance and illness. So with our past issues combined with our present aspects and the amount of imbalance, we gain a lot of stress. And the more these aspects impact our lives, the more stress we have in our life. Now, is there any questions so far about what I've just discussed before we move on? Just waiting for people to type. Won't be a sec. Okay, so this is a really important thing to understand, is that if you haven't healed the past, and it's not an excuse, it's not a blame game, And that's what I need you to understand about your past. We just need to heal it. Great, okay. So, no, we're not getting notes, but this will be recorded, so you will get a copy of this at the end as well. So great, let's move on to the next slide. Because the more stress that we have, the more we create this domino effect in our lives. And this is something that I really want you to grasp, because the more we have the domino effect for people who have weight and food issues, the more we're going into our addiction cycles. Now, when I talk about addiction cycles, I'm talking about anybody, whether you have yo-yo dieting, emotional eating, nighttime eating, binge eating, or food addiction here. So I'm covering the whole gambit when I'm talking about addiction. But addiction is the foundation, and stress is the foundation to your addiction. And the imbalance that creates or is created in your system. So what we find is that initially it starts with our brain. And in our brain, we have two main systems. We have our limbic system, or our emotional brain, and our thinking brain, which is our prefrontal cortex. And when there's an imbalance, what happens is usually the thinking brain, or the prefrontal cortex, is in charge, it's in control, allows us to problem solve, decision make, and plan appropriately. But when our brain becomes imbalanced with stress and everything else that we've been talking about from our past and our present aspects, then our emotional brain, or limbic system, actually takes over and it controls us. And what we know is that people who have a consistent history of yo-yo dieting, binge eating, a double fat gene, which is basically obesity, their brain actually functions differently to somebody who doesn't have a weight or food issue. It responds differently to stress. It's wired slightly differently. And then as a result, it then changes how our brain chemistry works. And brain chemistry is the key to keeping you in addiction. It's our brain chemistry that becomes imbalanced and causes those cravings, causes you to go into that puppet-like state where you're not in control. It's like a puppet master is controlling you, saying, go eat those foods, or the devil and the angel, however you want to explain it for yourself. It is the combination between your brain function and your brain chemistry that controls those things. So the more imbalanced you are in these two systems, the more likely your addiction, your emotional eating, binge eating, nighttime eating is going to be out of control, because your brain chemistry will drive you to artificially balance it through junk food. Then we have the hormones in our system. So once we have a domino effect in our brain chemistry, it then starts to affect our hormones in our body. And the main hormones that I want you to think about is really your metabolic hormones here. Insulin, leptin, ghrelin. Basically everything that's linked to you eating foods, feeling satisfied, feeling full, and then breaking down your sugars, your carbohydrates. And what we find is these systems are highly imbalanced in people who have weight and food issues. Then once these become imbalanced, then your body starts to function differently. And your body starts to find illness, disease. So we start seeing type 2 diabetes, or insulin resistance, leptin resistance, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. All of these things start to evolve. And the underlying pattern that we see is that our psychological state or emotional state, our thinking patterns, our belief systems are keeping us trapped in these. So what we feel like is that, again, those patterns of I'm not worthy, the all or nothing. I'm wanting a quick fix to get out of where I am. I'm feeling depressed. I'm feeling anxious. And so this domino effect continues, and then it spirals and continues to spiral and keeps you on the addiction cycle. So I hope that makes sense. It's a very quick version, but that's how the imbalance starts to erode each and every part of you, but causes the addiction cycle, because everything is out of balance. But when everything's in balance, then you no longer have addiction. You break free of all of these things because each part of you here is completely in balance. So now let's get on to balance and the difference between imbalance and balance, and how to find it with as much ease as possible. Now, because it's only a short presentation, I won't be able to go into the depths of this, but it will start you thinking differently, start you potentially seeing your life differently. So here on the screen we have the two sides. We have imbalance here. So with imbalance, what we're constantly trying to seek for many is this, what I call the sprint. We want the quick fix, the instant gratification. And this causes that all or nothing cycle that we go in. And as a result, that causes a lot of stress in our system and just perpetuates that chemical imbalance that I just showed you on the previous slide there. But also, it's all of these things that contribute to the imbalance. So if your present chaos is completely chaotic, is out of control, then this is going to be completely out of control, imbalanced. The more addictive food you will want to be eating. If this is highly unresolved, then of course this is going to be brought into your present, causing an imbalance here and causing the addictive cycles. So I'm going to tell you about myself and what I constantly was seeking. So with me, I was constantly seeking that quick fix. I have tried, like most of you, most of the diets on the planet. So, cutting out food groups. So it's high protein diets, the soup diet, the detox diet, whatever it was. I just wanted to see instant results. And I'd be hopping on the scales, once, twice, 3, 4 times a day minimum to see what the results were. But all this did was really continue this stress cycle. And it developed more chaos in my life because I was constantly seeking, wanting that quick fix. So I was getting more and more stressed. I was getting more and more irritable. And so as a result, in my life, at times I was hell to live with because I was cranky. I wasn't sleeping because I was starving. And my poor partners copped it. And then, of course, my unresolved issues. I was never good enough. And that was a big theme throughout my life. I was never good enough. And that started from my childhood because of my bullying and everything like that. So, and it wasn't, and I didn't realise that it was a running theme. But all of this actually then would cause me to go, I can't do this anymore, and flip out and have a binge. And now sometimes that binge would last for a day, 2 days, a week, a month. Because with a sprint, you start hard and fast, but you can't keep it going. So, most of you have probably noticed that your cycles of dieting have reduced over time. So you might have been able to diet once for 3 months. Then gradually it just moves back and back and back until some of you are down to 1 week and some people are down to not even a day. And because we try and change everything at once, we want that instant fix and it just doesn't work. And it just creates more imbalance in our systems. So instead, what I did when I broke free was I thought I have to change my entire focus. If I'm going to break free of food addiction and food and weight after over 34 years, I've got to do things differently. So the first thing I did was that I changed my mentality from that sprint to a marathon. It took me 34 years to get where I was. If I kept trying the sprints, I would never break free. So instead, I looked at it as a marathon. It took a marathon to get me to where I was. It was going to take me a marathon to get me out. And when I say a marathon, it means a pace that I was comfortable with, that didn't cause stress, that I could maintain for the rest of my life. That was the first cha-ching moment for me. But then I realised that my past was interfering and so was my present. So gradually, remember, marathon, not sprint, didn't change everything all at once. But I chose 3 things every 3 weeks to change. And I would choose one thing in each of these. So here I started with some of my negative beliefs and self-talk. Here I changed my living arrangements. So bit by bit, I started to change my 34 years of conditioning. I started to heal my past. I started to improve my present. But the biggest thing I found is that to manage my stress and my brain chemistry, I actually had to change a big thing about my past, and that was the perfectionistic mentality. Everything had to be perfect, otherwise it wasn't worth doing at all. And so when I changed that, that took some of the pressure off. And I developed the 80-20 principle. So when I said to myself, as long as I achieve it 80% of the time, whatever I do, that's good enough, that actually helped me. But then I started to slowly change my food away from addictive foods to good nutrition. And that, combined with managing my stress, started to change my brain chemistry. I started to balance my brain chemistry rather than this imbalance that was over on the sprint side or the imbalance side. I was noticing that bit by bit I wasn't feeling as stressed. I was talking to myself differently. I was no longer berating myself. I was no longer being my own worst critic, judging myself, being what I call the sergeant major, or being the passive neglectful parent, saying you can have whatever you want. I was actually being a supportive, nurturing person to myself, and combined, that balanced my system. I have a client who was 202 kilos when she came and saw me. Now, she was 48 years of age. And you can imagine 202 kilos. She had been through a lot in her life. She had a lot of unresolved issues from the past, all the way through her life. Her present was completely chaotic. She used to be a food addict, but now, because of her situation, because physically she was unable to work, she was disabled, she had a back injury, knee injury, lymphedema, all of these things, she was on a pension. So her financial restraints for buying food were so limited that she was hardly eating. All of this was placing stress on her system. Bit by bit, we started to improve it with the balance. Those 3 small changes every 3 weeks. We started with getting her good medical care because she didn't have good medical care. We started healing some of the issues, slowly improving her nutrition with the finances that she had. And the things that she could do was manage her own stress levels, anxiety, depression, all of those things. Now, it took 5 months and we didn't see much progress. But after that 5 months, all of a sudden, all of this started to align. And then within 3 months, she lost 30 kilos. And she was so proud of herself. And then she continues to lose to this day. And she feels like a new person. And that's the idea of the balance versus imbalance process. So finding balance with ease, just to reiterate, is the marathon. No quick fixes. And for many of you, that's going to be one of the hardest things to do. But you do that by 3 small changes every 3 weeks. But choose the changes that cause the least amount of stress for you. And the changes that you know that you're going to achieve. So that you get that sense of achievement and stop feeling like a failure, feeling hopeless and helpless. So choose the things that are easy to achieve. And if you maintain it 80% of the time, that's great. That's all we're after, no perfection. And if you don't achieve it 80% of the time, then just put it on the next 3 weeks. Don't worry about it. Relax. Manage your stress. That's the biggest and most important part as well. And gain support, whether that be support from family, friends, work colleagues, or people who are in your medical allied health team. Or you can join a supportive community like we're trying to develop through the Fat Key, an online membership. And that way we've got people who are going through the same things, understanding each other, but building that supportive community together. So, for staying on, your first bonus is you will get that 3 changes document. So there's 3 small changes to help you be accountable to yourself and so you can see your progress. And the next one is stress management. In this video, I will give you some very basic stress management techniques that you can put in your everyday, just like brushing your teeth. Very, very simple, but very, very effective. I use it with myself and I use it with all of my clients, and everybody loves them. And they are so effective in managing your stress. So, question time. Okay, Meg's got a question about keeping a food diary. Food diaries can be really good to keep as long as you don't count calories and you don't use it as a punishment restrictive tool. And what I mean by that is that most of the time when we keep a diary, we look at it and go, oh, I've eaten way past what I should have and it's only 3 p.m. so I'm not allowed anything until 7 or 8 p.m. Now you might be starving, but because you think you've eaten your quota for the day, you won't eat anything until later in the day or that evening. So I don't like using it for calorie counting. I don't like to use it for a restrictive